Meanwhile, with so many of America's young military men needed overseas, the military services looked for ways to find help with a variety of stateside jobs. Secretary of the Navy Josephus Daniels was one who looked to women for that help.
He said, well, is there any reason why they shouldn't be sworn into the Naval Reserve? And his aides looked up the law, the legislation, and much to their surprise, they found that someone had neglected to write in the word male into the legislation. So Mr. Daniels said, all right, bring in the women, and that was it.
Women served in the reserve forces of the Marines as well.
And they did administrative duties. They worked as electricians. In some cases, they worked as cryptologists, doing intelligence work.
In November of 1918, news that an armistice was at hand spread, but the fighting continued right to the last bitter moment.
It didn't end until November 11th at 11 a.m. There was actually fighting up to that moment, and hundreds had still died.
And at the stroke of 11, the guns were gladly laid down, and the celebrations began.
The Americans have always had sort of a bravado about them. And once the United States entered the war, there was this feeling amongst a lot of American soldiers that we were going to go over and we were going to end the war that had been a stalemate for so long. And in a sense, that did happen. The United States did turn the tide of the war, but lost a significant amount of men.
53,000 Americans were dead. The overall death count for the world's first great war is equally sobering. From the war's start in 1914 to November 1918, more than 10 million people lost their lives. After World War I ended with the armistice of November 11, 1918, the troops who returned home first were met with huge celebrations.
Every city that had troops affiliated in large numbers threw some sort of parade.
But the celebrations were soon only a memory. In the years following the war, many veterans had difficulty holding down jobs and readjusting to civilian life. With this in mind, veteran service organizations lobbied for a bonus for those who served overseas. Congress authorized the bonus, called an adjusted service credit, in 1924 that averaged about $1,500 per person. But there was a catch. The veterans couldn't collect the bonus until 1945. Then, on October 29, 1929, the stock market crashed, a day we now recall as Black Tuesday.
And the United States became mired in the Great Depression, which meant jobs and opportunities were pretty much out the door. It didn't matter if you were a veteran. Families were literally starving. The veterans decided that they wanted to cash in on that bonus.
What started with a small group of veterans traveling cross-country from Oregon grew along the way, and in the summer of 1932, thousands of veterans from all over the country converged on Washington. The Bonus Army, as they were called, built shanty towns on the grounds of the Capitol and spent their days lobbying for immediate payment of the bonus. On June 17th, Congress again said no. In late July, President Herbert Hoover ordered police to clear the downtown area of thousands of veterans who still remained. During the action, police shot and killed 2 veterans and were then attacked themselves. Many on both sides were injured. The altercation led President Hoover to further action. This time, he called upon the Army. The force that set out to remove the protesters included cavalry, infantry, and light tanks. In the hours that followed, confusion, smoke, flames, and the sound of conflict were everywhere. In the end, the Bonus Army was scattered, and the veterans headed for home. Although the bonus marchers didn't achieve their immediate goal in 1932, approval to pay the bonus early did come from Congress 4 years later. But the most important legacy of the Bonus Army's efforts came about in 1944, when Congress passed the GI Bill of Rights. the bill that authorized so many of the rights and benefits military men and women enjoy today. Great War veterans eventually formed their own support organization, World War I Veterans of the USA. Over the years, the organization kept members informed on issues related to their benefits and organized conventions and other activities. Management of the organization now rests with one woman, Muriel Sue Parkhurst Kerr.
To the point that it was just too expensive. I bluffed my way into the Veterans of World War I. I didn't know how to type. I didn't know how to take shorthand. I didn't even know that filing system, that those letters and those files that stick up and you're supposed to put things in. This new office space.
Organization leaders saw a compassion in Muriel Sue and hired her anyway. That was 32 years ago.
But we went from 21 paid employees in the office down to me, a volunteer. If you've ever wanted to know where everything is done for the Veterans of World War I, this is it.
Muriel Sue's last paycheck came 12 years ago, and for 10 years, she's handled the organization's daily business at home.
I'll send it to you in a PDF format.
Muriel Sue says coping with the loss of staff and office space over the years is easy, especially when compared with the loss of members.
The wreaths I've already made reservations for. There were 875, almost 900,000 members, dues-paying members out of the several million that were still living. And now, of course, we have less than 30.
Still, Muriel Sue keeps on with the work and tries to iron out problems as she can.
These are friends. I've known these people for 30 years. And so when somebody calls and they say that the new person that's taking care of them won't cut the crust off their bread, I'm sorry.
Although she knows it won't be long before she'll have no more members to care for, memories of earlier times help Muriel Sue cope with that reality.
When I think of how much fun they've had going to France and getting medals that they didn't even know that they had, or being able to meet somebody at a national convention and get married at 90 years old, you know, that sort of thing. Somehow that sort of thing just, those are the things you remember. This is underneath the Arc de Triomphe.
It's been a long, eventful road for Muriel Sue and the veterans she cares so much for. A road she started on and stayed with because of a promise made to the organization's national commander more than 3 decades ago.
And he and I went back a long ways. Yes, 1975. You don't go back on a promise. It's the only thing that you can do yourself, that you can guarantee, that you have complete control over.
Today, 105-year-old Frank Buckles is national commander of the World War I Veterans Organization.
She's the one that really held that place together. She's a remarkable person.
I am the luckiest girl in the world. I have had 750,000 to 800,000 grandfathers and, you know, another 100,000 grandmothers. I've been so honored to be able to walk with them and march with them.